In the last video, you figured out how to find the limiting reactant and then the reactant that's in excess. So if you don't know how to do that, go back and watch the video before this. There's a link in the description. So this is the last problem we did. And we figured out that the oxygen here, 2.9 moles of oxygen, that was limiting. Because when we ran the numbers here, it produced 5.8 moles of water. But with the H2, it produced 6.2 moles of water. So this is limiting how much we can produce. That means this is in excess. And we want to know how much H2 is going to be left over. That's what we need to figure out. You might be tempted to say 6.2 minus 5.8. That'll tell us the excess. But it doesn't work. Don't fall for it. That's because this is H2O. This is the product water. We're not interested in how much water is produced. We want to know, we start with 6.2 moles of H2. How much is going to be left over? Because we know this is in excess. So here's how we do it. So remember, this was our limiting reactant and this was in excess. So the question we need to ask ourselves, if we have 2.9 moles of oxygen, and that's the limiting reactant, that's what's going to run out, how much of this hydrogen will we use up? Because we have too much. How much do we use to make the water here? So we can just set the ratio up again. 2.9 is to 1 is x is to 2. And you can already see it's a 1 to 2. So this number doubled. So this number will double as well. But let's do the math. So if we start with 2.9 moles of oxygen, we'll use 5.8 moles of H2. And that's important. That's H2. So that's how much we use. That's how much we started with. So now we could subtract. So we ended up with 0.4 moles of H2 left over. And that's the type of question you'll be asked quite frequently with these limiting reactant problems. So again, just to recap, we'd figured out that the limiting reactant was 2.9 moles in the previous problem. So we said if we have 2.9 moles of oxygen, how much of this H2 can we use? And we said we'll end up using 5.8 moles of it. Since we started with 6.2, we just subtract and we get 0.4 moles of H2. That's left over. So now pause and give it a try. And here we did this problem in the previous video. We found out that H2 was the limiting reactant because it produced fewer moles. So this is our limiting reactant. That means this is in excess. So I'll clear all this for you and you can solve it. So here's how we do it. We know that this is in excess. We'll have some left over. So we want to know if we start with 4.5 moles of H2, how much of this will we use? We'll call that X. Do the math. So it's 2.25 moles in X. That's the oxygen, O2. That's important. So now we started with 2.8 moles. We use 2.25. We just subtract. So in this reaction, when we start with 2.8 moles of oxygen, we end up using 2.25. That means 0.55 moles of oxygen gas is left over. So that's how you can solve these limiting reactant problems where you have something left over. You can figure out how much of that excess reactant is left over. That's it. This is Dr. B, and thanks for watching.